This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Find out more at the end of the video and find my promo discount link in the description. Well, we finally got here. The first race of 2022 has happened, with all its new rules and new cars and, seemingly, a new pecking order. For now. So I thought the best thing to do off the back of a weekend full of surprises and flurries of information was to go over some of the talking points out of the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend as we bid to understand exactly how this season is starting to shape up. So, Ferrari look good, don't they? The funny thing is, even though they seem to have the strongest, most consistent test with solid laps and high mileage across all 6 days of testing, it always felt like Red Bull had the better package. So it was right up until Q3 really, when Leclerc squeaked out a mighty pole position lap. But even then we expected a mighty fight back from Verstappen and Red Bull. And although they did push Ferrari hard, Leclerc did seem to be in control of this race. Great consistent pace, able to peg a comfort gap to Verstappen for the most part, and confident enough to risk losing track position at turn 1 in order to grab the DRS down to turn 4. Charles said himself he would brake and position himself to follow Verstappen through turns 2 and 3 to get a nice run on him down the second straight with a boost of DRS to attack him back into turn 4. 3 times he did this into turn 1. And yielding track position means he had a strong enough belief that he could grab that position back again. If it was more marginal, he would have defended harder and been much more aggressive into the first corner, which means A, the Ferrari has Red Bull beating pace, and B, at Bahrain at least, these cars can fight. Which brings us on to the big question. These new cars, are they working? And look, this is only the first race, and the first time we've properly been able to test these cars following one another. Yeah, they followed a bit in testing, but only in a race are they going to do it with full purpose. And you know what? They do seem to follow each other well. If we look at the Leclerc-Verstappen battle again, Verstappen was able to mount an attack on Leclerc lap after lap. And yes, that battle was DRS assisted, but the important part is that Verstappen was able to stay close through all the wiggly bits and stay within striking range without losing ground. And that's great. And it's something we saw throughout the field, with cars being able to hang on to their rivals ahead throughout the lap without losing much ground. Now yes, this is only one race and one track, and it was night, so temperatures are much lower, which reduces some of the issues tyres will get with overheating when following, but this is definitely a good start. We expected and hoped this year would show a noticeable incremental improvement on the old cars, and I think it has. Now, Verstappen did have to break off his attack after a few laps after eventually taking too much life out of his tyres. You can't keep attacking forever. But that leads on to the next question. These new tyres. So Pirelli wanted to induce more two-stop strategies without making degradation an absolute nightmare, and actually, despite my own skepticism, 2 stops were absolutely the way to go. Some drivers like Max Verstappen even went for 3 stops without the intervention of the safety car. These tyres definitely had a limited life, and yes, drivers did have to be mindful of that in how they took life out of the tyres, and more on that in just a second. But in race 1, it didn't seem to be the pendulum swinging over them that it might have been in other races. The drivers mostly drove as they needed to until they felt the tyres going, and then they pitted. There was a little bit of complaining, of course. Verstappen seemed to feel the tyres going off a little earlier than he would have liked, and indeed he did go on to that 3-stop strategy to favour pushing hard on new tyres over nursing the old ones. And because Mercedes weren't the focus of the race, we had no idea how many times Lewis Hamilton got on the radio to Bono about his tyres. But I read this first race as a positive, as we got a clear advantage with 2-stopping, as Pirelli wanted, and on top of that we saw teams trying a number of different strategies. The harder end of the compound scale ended up being quite tricky to work here, so you could spot the teams who were flailing around somewhat when they went screw it and tried the hard tyres, which was an error. Something we did see a smidgen of was the effect of the tyre blankets being reduced to 70 degrees this year. With the tyres a little cooler out of the pits, the outlap takes that bit longer to get full performance from the rubber. And this was most clear with Hamilton, who stopped for hards and struggled so hard for grip in the first half of the lap that Zhou and Bottas overtook him. Now, while this was a little bit of an outlier with the cold night race and the hard tyres on a very heavy car, this could end up adding a little extra dimension to outlaps if drivers need to work warming up the rubber into their first lap out of the pits. all part of the added skill to maintain and gain position through the stops. And speaking of outlaps, Max Verstappen was told not to push too hard on his outlaps for the good of the rubber, but both times he felt he could have grabbed the lead had he been able to push to the maximum. And maybe he would have, certainly through the first set of stops. But we did see that his car pushed its tyres a little bit harder than the Ferrari did. Leclerc stopped only to cover off Verstappen after all. We heard a lot less complaining from him, partly due to the fact that he was the race leader and the race leader benefits from running in cool, clean air. Nonetheless, we saw before how Leclerc had the pace and confidence to position himself to re-overtake Verstappen when he needed to. Had Verstappen taken significant life out of his tyres right out of the box to get the lead, he would likely have been a bit of a sitting duck to Leclerc over the course of that stint. This is something we won't know for sure, of course, but while of course Verstappen was angry for not being able to grab what was in front of him, it seems he would have suffered in the long run anyway. But to an extent, Max was still right, of course. It's easier to deal with your problem from the lead than from second place. Track position will remain key. Elsewhere in the field, it looks like controlling porpoising without compromising your aerodynamics is going to be a big part of being competitive this season. Mercedes are suffering from porpoising and it is hammering them. Through the middle part of the lap, they have good front-running pace for the most part. But the porpoising, the bouncing rear end that they experience coming down the back straight and the pit straight are affecting them badly into the last and first corners, to the tune of several tenths. The consensus is that Mercedes have a very fast car hampered by problems that they need to get on top of fast. And frankly, they were handed a huge lifeline by Red Bull's double retirement. If Merc are able to get its car back to the front, this result in Bahrain could make a huge difference to their year. Aston Martin seem to have the same problems as the Mercedes, except they have put in measures to stop the porpoising, but in a way that has hampered their performance. So they need to dial their car in from the other direction. McLaren have solved their brake issue seemingly, but their extremely hampered testing means that they are behind. The teams say the car is behaving well, but is just lacking grip. We expect a team like McLaren to bring this car up through the field, but what an incredibly competitive field we have this year. Every team is going to be gunning for good points now. But here's the important part. We are at the steep end of the development curve right now. These 2022 regulations are fresh out of the box. We are right here on this curve. And that means through this steep part of the line, teams are going to be finding performance and development faster than ever. In a couple of years, we'll be up at the shallow end of the curve where teams are finding fractions of tenths here and there with a slightly different shaped front wing or a new slot in the floor edge. But here, they'll be working out ways to cut seconds out of their car's performance over the season. And as such, the pecking order today will most likely not be the pecking order halfway through the season. These teams will be mixing out throughout the year. Alfa and Haas have a great start, but can they keep up? Will Mercedes outdevelop Ferrari and Red Bull? Will McLaren actually get back into that top 3 fight like they planned? It is all going to go off this year, and I, for one, will be thrilled to see it. This video is brought to you by Brilliant. Brilliant is a lovely online learning platform for subjects in science, tech, engineering and maths that uses well-crafted interactive tools to make working through their lessons interesting, engaging and genuinely useful in helping concepts stick. As I've said before, I used to work in maths education and these kind of tools are really powerful for people trying to get their heads around STEM topics. So for example, you might be someone who finds maths a bit frustrating and wish you could get your head around it a little bit better. Bar models and manipulative tools are a really effective way to visualize maths problems, and Brilliant have courses that let you imagine and play with bar models and widgets to fully understand how they represent maths in a much more tangible way. Because maths and sciencey stuff doesn't have to be this weird, intangible, abstract concept that some people just don't get. It's all doable if you can find a way to make it click with your brain, and that's just what Brilliant does across a wide variety of topics. It's easy to engage with at your own pace around your life and actually enjoy making progress and increasing your understanding, which is just what we like on this channel. So I fully recommend getting involved, and the first 200 of you to click on my link, brilliant.org/chamber, will get a full 20% off the annual premium subscription. So get stuck in and start learning by doing.